I knew that someone like Walker Lee existed long before I even knew his name. Obviously, Black men and women worked on this campus in the early days of the 20th century because that was the reality of life at a segregated institution. His name sort of bubbled up in the archives very early on as an indication of the essential contributions that he made. It's very likely that he was among the first of 6 Black men who were hired. He worked primarily in what was called Science Hall at the time. It was the only academic building on campus. Hard to believe that there was only one academic building. Today, that building is Gabbin Hall. So my office is actually in that building, and I know every day I walk the same halls that Walker Lee walked. It's pretty remarkable. Some of the things that we do know about him, to give a little more context. He was born in 1875 in Bridgewater, a town just south of Harrisonburg, in the aftermath of the United States Civil War. The 1870s was a period many of you probably know called Reconstruction, a time of enormous racial, economic, social, political upheaval in the Commonwealth. He attended local segregated schools, became literate, and probably by the time he was a teenager or a young adult, began to smack into Jim Crow segregation as it was emerging at the end of the 19th century. He quickly married a woman named Ida and started a family. Somehow, he found out about the position that would be opening up in 1909. He came to work here that year, and he worked here for almost 20 years. He was apparently a very highly regarded and highly respected figure on campus. Everybody knew Walker Lee. He had a remarkable memory. He knew everybody's name on campus, and they noted that he was better at this than President Doris himself. He belonged to a fraternal organization called the Knights of Pythias. His father was also a member, and they met at a lodge in downtown Harrisonburg. He was also a member of Ames Methodist Church down in Bridgewater. We imagine the impact, but we also have some corroborating evidence. When he died in 1929, the white newspaper, the Daily News Record, printed a very long and very glowing obituary, and they described that the number of people who attended the service and the interment at the cemetery was the largest the town of Bridgewater had ever seen. This gives us some sense of the impact that he had on both the Black and the white communities here. When people see the name Robert Walker Lee, or Walker Lee as he was known, I'd like them to understand the kind of contributions that he made, but also to understand that he was the first of many Black men and women who worked on this campus and contributed to making it a phenomenal success over the course of time. We still have a lot of work to do to identify their stories and reclaim and tell their stories publicly, but every single one of them matters to this community, collectively as well as individually. And I also think we should pause and recognize the kinds of contributions that they might have made if there had not been segregation in the 20th century.
Walker Lee was my second great-grandfather. He passed away in Bridgewater in 1929. Through stories I've heard, like of a massive portrait of Walker that hung on my great-grandparents' wall, to reading his obituary that spoke of the large crowd, both Black and white, that attended, and learning that in the 1920s, the dean of the college even spoke of him in the annual, I can conclude that he was a well-known and admired person in the surrounding community. When I first heard of the building on campus bearing his name, a sense of joy and accomplishment took hold of me. Walker Lee wasn't a professor or high society. He wasn't even a general. He was a man that worked day in and day out, keeping daily life normal for everyone, sometimes excluding his own family. Lastly, this building is for the people in our community. My son and daughter are 6th-generation Lees that still live in that same community. And this is something that my family will cherish forever.
Uncle Walker's brother was my grandfather. Uncle Walker passed away 31 years before I was born. However, as a small child, I clearly remember this large photo of Uncle Walker that would hang on the living room wall of my grandfather's home. I remember the stories that my grandmother would tell me of how much he was loved and admired and respected by his brother, my grandfather, and also how much he was respected and admired by the citizens of the town of Bridgewater. Part of his janitorial duties was cleaning the classrooms and cleaning off the chalkboards. But he would always leave these messages behind on the chalkboard, and when the students came in the next morning, they were very intrigued by the messages that he left behind. My uncle was described as, and I quote, of unusual intelligence, unquote. I'm sure he was labeled that because back in those days, being an African American, if you were smart and you were educated or you were intelligent, unfortunately in the eyes of some, you were considered unusual. Uncle Walker had 7 children, 6 girls, 1 boy, some who stayed local, some who moved away. This house that you see here is the house that Uncle Walker and his wife Ida raised their 7 children. That house still stands to this day in the town of Bridgewater. We are pretty confident that Uncle Walker is a descendant of slaves from Campbell County, Virginia. Uncle Walker was a very dedicated hard worker, spending 120 hours a week from what we can tell when he worked at what we now know as James Madison University.